Hello everyone. Today we're going to pick up with Dreamweaver again and talk about the inserting of items, HTML elements, about CSS. I'm going to show you some more properties that are in CSS that you can use to help lay out and design your work. We're going to talk about nesting different elements within another element. And we're going to start with our local root folder that we left off last time. Remember, it was called our sourdough project 1 because I set up a project folder. And what we had made was an HTML file and this sourdough project CSS file. Now, I also want to remind you, you'd think, oh, I'll just double click on this folder. Don't do that because it doesn't necessarily open up your local site folder that way. Even though you're clicking on something in your site folder, there's no guarantee that you'll end up in the right local site folder. So what I would always do is open Dreamweaver first. I put it in my doc and we're going to open it and we're just going to confirm that file is what we're working with via our files menu. Much better option. And I know that goes against everything you've always learned with the Mac and probably Windows too. But better to go to our files browser and confirm that we are, in fact, you know what, I'm going to even close this one and just open it again from here. This guarantees that we are opening the file within our local root folder and that Dreamweaver has a correct local root folder established. If I go to manage sites, you can see the sourdough site is the one I have. That is what I want. Okay. I'm going to put this in the live view for a minute. And we'll preview it actually, it's even smarter move in Google Chrome, this little button down here. And this is where we left off. We had a header, we had a subheader, our navigation is going to go here on the left. These are the links to our main content, which will go here. And we're going to have these buttons on the right be probably ingredients and supplies. Okay. This one was floated right, these two are floated left. Remember that because what I think we're going to put on here, just because it's pretty typical in a website, even though I don't really need one for this project, we're going to put a footer on. Okay, so, and we're going to give this thing a title because right now it says Untitled Document in this tab. And so that would be a smooth start. We'll do that one first. Okay, split view is what I meant to hit. And where it says Untitled Document, I'm just going to go ahead and type in making sourdough pretzels. Now remember, this is the title that's going into your browser. It's not the file title. So we can use spaces. You can call it whatever you want. Don't call it index up here. Index is for your file because that's what a web browser would load first if it was a web server. This is just the thing that's going to appear at the top of the tab for the user. So if you called it something like index, it wouldn't mean anything to your typical user. They'd be like, what the freak is that? Or what the fork is that? Anyway, they wouldn't get it. They wouldn't get what an index is. So call it something very specific to the project that will define it in their, when they bookmark it, they could come back to it later. Okay. Let's go back down here and we're going to add a footer. So remember, the important thing to do is be in split view and be down here. So when we add our HTML element, it'll be in the correct stacking order with the footer at the bottom. So it should be the last thing before the end of our body tag right here. All right, so it's in the body. Go to our insert menu. We say insert a footer. Now some weird things are going to happen. I can just warn you right now. This window is going to come up. This always comes up when you go to the insert menu and add something. But there's other ways to add elements because I'm doing it from down here in our code section. It's automatically popping this up. But if I want to add something in like design view, this wouldn't necessarily pop up. So if you follow along and do it like in the same kind of strategy I'm doing it, this should always pop up. So we need a footer. I'm going to give this actually an ID. And I'll call it sourdough footer. Okay. Do new CSS rule. since I've closed the machine and started it again since yesterday, notice it doesn't have the correct style sheet down here right now, so I need to make sure I pay attention again. It's not auto-populating that with my current style sheet, but it is auto-populating this with sourdough footer and has a hashtag because it's an ID selector, which to remind you means I only have one on a page. It's a unique ID, unique selector. All right. So let's switch this to my sourdough.css and say OK. Also remember, giving everything a background. Let's do that first. I'm going to give this a whole different color since really I don't even need a footer. I'm just showing you how you would put one on, and also it's following some floated items, so that'll make it a little bit special because we're going to have to do some things about the floats so that this works correctly. Say OK, and the footer should be nice and long. So again, we'll make it 1100 pixels or 1000 pixels. Keep everything for your first project under 1200 pixels wide for the width of your screen. Is sort of a good starting point. That's very conservative and fairly small. So if you look at it on a big monitor, it's going to have extra space, and we need to realize we have to design for that. So we'll talk more about that later. All right, height of, let's just say 200 pixels. Everything's in pixels for now. Later on, we're going to switch the units to something else, but for now, just stick with pixels. And I'm going to stick with zero padding and zero margin again. Remember, if I do increase the padding, it's going to make my box bigger. So if I say, I have a 1200 wide box, but then I add 20 pixels of padding on the left and right, it would really be 1240 pixels in terms of actually how much room it occupies on the screen. That's just for the padding, not for the margin. Okay. Now you're like, okay, my blue box is stuck behind those things. And recall, very important concept we learned last time was stacking order. Remember when we float something like these three objects, it's taken out of the normal stacking order. So basically the first two lines are in the normal stacking order, my header and my subheader. These three are all taken out because they're all floated. It was one of the things I added in the CSS designer. So if we went to this, you can see I click on show set, I come down here, it's floated left. You can see that tiny little box around it. It's kind of hard to see, but it's got the float left turned on. I could also look at the style sheet in my code view so you can see it all, and you can see that it also has a float left right here, line 32. So does the sourdough main, my main content also floated, and my external links, if I scroll down, you'll see they're also floated. And here's my new one that I'm working on. All right, so because those are floated, they're taking out of the normal stacking order. And since they're taking out of the normal stacking order, this purple footer flows up right under this. Well, how do I change that? In this case, you might think, well, I'll just add some margin that's, equal to the tallest box, and that would work. It would move it down. But there's also built-in ways to just take advantage of the fact that we want to just sort of follow the normal stacking order again, because that's sort of one of our things we can work with in terms of building stuff for a browser. So let's go back to split here for a second so we can all see what's going on, and go back to my source code instead of my CSS. Source code is HTML. And go over to my CSS designer, make sure we're still selected on all, make sure we're on our sourdough project.css, go to our latest rule. Our selector is called sourdough footer. The entire thing is called a rule. This part is called the selector. That's why it's under the list called selectors, make it easier on you. And I have show set connect clicked right now, so it's only showing the things that we've set. All right, the back, you know what, I'm going to change the background color just a hair to make it brighter. Okay, brighter blue. Okay, so we want that automatically to pop down under this green content bar. All right, so what we have to do is we unclick show set and scroll down a hair. It's kind of slow about this. You will see that under the float, there's this thing that says clear. Well, I mean, we could float this to the left, and then it would be, well, I'll just go ahead and do it. If I float it to the left, it'll also go down there because it now recognizes its friends that are also in this floated group. So it will respond to the 3 items above it and also float. But let's just say I want to get back to my normal stacking order because maybe there's more stuff that's going to come after the footer. Typically there wouldn't be, but just let's pretend. So I'm gonna X that out, and you have this disable if you want to just turn something off temporarily, which is super handy when you're trying to figure out what the hell's going wrong with something. Because the whole thing about cascading style sheets is that different rules you've assigned for different objects can affect other objects. And also, you can have more than one class applied to something. So, there might be in this blue footer, I've already written a rule for the footer, but I might also write a rule for the type inside of it later on. Well, I will be. And maybe they say different things, like one will say make the type white, and one will say make the type green. So which one of those rules is going to win if I've applied 2 rules to the same thing? Well, that's what cascading is about. There's a very elaborate sort of point system, basically, to describe which one is going to win. But sometimes you just got to turn things on and off to figure that out. So if I hover over any one of these things, there'll be a disable feature, so I can turn it off temporarily. You can see the blue box floated back to its original position. Or I can just delete it. I'm going to just delete this property now. Okay, I'm only deleting the property, not the selector. Just the float property, that's all I'm doing. And I'm going to show you something else. So right after it, there's this clear thing. And if I scroll over, it says clear left, clear right, or clear both. If I click clear both, which I want to do because I have 2 things floated left and 1 thing floated right, it also pops down here. All right, so I didn't have to float it. What it's doing is it's just basically saying, okay, I recognize there's floated things above me, and basically we're going to start the page from scratch after those floated objects. It's sort of resetting the board. So my footer now is down where I wanted the footer to be. In fact, I will even do Google Chrome, say save, and yes, it needs to save the style sheet. And if I scroll down, I'll see my footer. All right. And again, notice everything automatically is on the left edge. Unless I put a margin over here, the default is the left edge. All right, so how do you fix that? Well, let's both center this main content here, and we'll center the footer as well. We'll start with that, and then we'll nest some stuff within this green box, because I didn't want to have a picture up here, and then I want to have some type under here for my, if you remember, my original diagram. Okay, so real quick, let's jump back to Dreamweaver. Well, not real quick. You guys can pause or fast forward this video all you want. I watch so many videos on double speed that, if you do it too, that's totally cool with me. All right, so our footer. Let's go down to the footer. And it's a little rough on this screen because if you're working on a small monitor, this is my laptop, it's not very large. I can try to see if it can emulate a larger screen, but it's not going to get that big. So I'll just have to use my preview a lot. So you saw the preview before, it was on the left edge. So how do you center something? Okay, there is a very specific set of things to do, but essentially it comes down to having the margins on the left and the margins on the right work automatically. So there's like an auto margins feature. So we can go to our sourdough footer, and then we can go to our margins. Right here, Jeff. And where the units are, for the left, click on that and you say auto. And then you click on, and oops, I had them all locked. I'm going to unlock, I'm going to set this back to, you know what, I'm going to undo this for a minute. I'm just going to undo. Uncheck this. I did Command Z to undo, you can do that. And then pick auto for the left and auto for the right. I don't want the top and bottom to be auto margins. Okay, now let's take a look at what's going on here. We're going to probably have to jump into our Google Chrome. Yes. Okay, there might be a few. Oh, it worked already. sometimes there's a few more things we need to set, but that worked out great. So look at that. It stays in the center. I just said auto left and auto right margins. Sometimes you have to set something called the positioning to relative. It really depends on some of the other objects you have on your page. But primarily setting the margins to left, the left and right margins to auto should center that thing. Let's try it with this green box too. That one might be a little more complicated because there's some other objects we have in here. Also, when I scroll, watch these left and right boxes right here. They scroll with the page because we want to change that so they fix right where they are the entire time. That's one of the other things I want to show you today is the fixed positioning property. Okay, so back to Dreamweaver for a minute. This one was called SD main 0. So you can always click on it and it'll show you the class that we've applied to it, or in this case it's an ID because it has a hashtag. So we have an ID SD main 0. And for the next page, it'll be called SD main 1, and then SD main 2, or you could, if there's a certain kind of content, I could have called it like main bake, main rise, main eat for my pretzels or whatever. Something that's describing what's going to go in that area pretty well. Okay, so let's try this. Let's go back to my margins. And remember I had a 100 pixel margin. I'm going to see if I disable that. It takes that margin off. I can re-enable it just to see what happens. Again, important for debugging, but I'm going to go ahead and just remove it. Okay, so it's gone. And then we're going to keep our top margin set at 35, and we're going to come down here and say auto for, oops, you got to actually hit the units, Jeff. Auto. I think I did hit the units, I just wasn't paying attention. Auto. Okay. Now you can see, oh, nothing happens. What the hell? Well, it's because it's still floated. So I'm gonna have to, so here's where this comes in really handy. I can think, okay, why is it not working? Literally, Jeff just did it with the other thing and it worked perfectly the first time. Why is it not working now? Well, again, it's because there's other properties that are sort of getting in the way. So I need to think, well, what could that be? Well, I only have a certain number of properties set here. So, it makes that fairly easy. But I would start with the floating thing and say, okay, let's just see what happens if I disable that. And sure enough, when I disable that, my box floats to the center. Now you're probably like, what happened to my other guy? Well, he got knocked down to the next thing because remember what happened here? I didn't, this thing isn't floated. That's okay because we're going to actually fix this guy where it was. We're going to actually unfloat that as well. We're going to unfloat everything. So you may need the floats depending on your setup, and you may not. I want my my header and my stuff on the left, my links on the left and links to the right, to be to say persistent and be in the exact same spot. Even if I scroll down to content on the bottom, I want those links available. So you can see they scroll with the page, they're not staying available. So I'm not going to worry right now about this guy being down here. I would have to have a little more complicated version of the setup if I want the guide to go back up here, this guide back up here. But what I want to do is just fix it. So let's just do that. Instead of chasing like one thing at a time, think of the overall goal. It's much, much more efficient. Okay, so also let's just go ahead and preview this too, just because you'll be able to see it better. Okay, so that green box, it's staying in the center of the screen. Again, I set the left and right margins to auto. I took the float off. Okay, notice this is still floating right, but because this one is not floated anymore, it's basically starting a new thing. Okay. Again, we're not going to worry about that right now because we got this to center like we wanted to. And now what I want to happen is when I scroll, I don't want this guy over here to disappear or this guy. I want them to stay exactly where they were. So we're going to do another thing that's unique and new. And that involves changing the position. So you might have noticed over, if I uncheck the show set, I scroll down a little bit, there is sort of nestled in here in a really awkward way. I don't know why they just didn't put it with this block, but it's because it goes with these positioning elements. But if I click on here, there's 4 options for positioning an object. Static, absolute, fixed, and relative. Well, we are going to go ahead and pick fixed, okay? But not for the SD main. We want to be here on step buttons. So step buttons, we'll go over here and we're going to say fixed. And before we do that, even I'm going to take it out of my, take the float off, which made that next box pop down because I'm not floating this anymore. So they're all like in the normal stacking order. But the second I set this to fixed, it will once again, take it out of the normal stacking order. So floating something takes it out of the normal stacking order, as well as setting a fixed position. So the fixed position can be a little awkward on the screen, depending on what view you're in. If you're in this design view, it wouldn't look like it was working. So make sure you're in the live view, which we've been in the whole time. And we're on our step buttons, that red box to the left. We'll say, let's go ahead and set the position to fixed. Now, if I set the position to fixed, I need to actually tell it where to be. Okay, I still see it on the screen, but I'm kind of lucky. It knows, it's just automatically putting it in the spot I basically wanted it. But what I'm going to do is say I want it to be 0 pixels from the left edge. But watch, if I scrub, I can say exactly how many pixels from the left edge I want. I'm going to leave the right blank because the way fixed positioning works is I need to pick a left or a right edge, but not both, and a top or a bottom, but not both. And the reason you can't do both is because you can't tell it you want 0 pixels from the left edge and then 900 pixels from the right edge, because who knows how big your user's browser is going to be. You know, that's a variable that you can't ascertain. So just pick one. It has to be an or. Oops, I'm going to set this to 0 again. 0 pixels. And then from the top, 0 pixels puts it way up there. You know, it's reading some of the other margins in from something, but we're just going to scroll down until we get essentially, let's just pick 300 because I can remember that easy. No, let's pick 250 because I can also remember that easy. All right, and we're going to set the same thing for the other one. So now here's the cool thing. Let's go ahead and preview this so I can show you what's happening here. Yes. So when I scroll down now, look, those links will stay there when I have the links in there the entire time. If I click on something and go to a different part of the page, maybe I have content way, way down at the bottom, those links will still be there, so I won't have to scroll back to the top and click on the next thing. You know, it'll always be persistent and fixed. Sometimes I do this with like the header or the footer. Like if there's like an important telephone number in the footer that you want to leave on the screen the whole time, you can set it to fixed and fix it 0 pixels off the bottom. We'll go ahead and set the header to fixed too and show you a few other options for the header and fix the right one as well, the right navigation. Okay, so the right navigation. It's called external link X-link buttons for external link buttons because that's what's going to go in there. So I'll click on that. I'm going to take the float, make sure it's disabled. It pops over to the left side now because it's normal stacking order, and it's ignoring this fixed one over here, the darker or the brighter red, because that one's already been set to fixed, so it's basically invisible to everything else. It's been taken out of the normal stacking order. And now we'll go ahead and fix this one. So we'll go to position and fixed. And with this one, we're going to set it 0. So don't worry about the fact that it's moved somewhere. We're just going to go ahead and set it the pixel thing. Say 0 pixels from the right. And how much did I do the other one down before from the top? I don't remember. I think it was 250. We'll just go ahead and put this in and make it the same. That's funny. I picked something I thought I could remember, and then I forgot. It was 250. I can tell they're all evened up there. All right, so watch. what happens here? Oops, that's not Google Chrome. All right, scroll down. Those two stay there. We'll just do the last one, and then we'll move on to nesting in this area. So back to Dreamweaver. Go to the header. Now here's what's going to happen with the header that's going to be a little awkward. If I fix the header, my quiz question to you is, what will happen? Well, if I fix the header, it's going to take it out of normal stacking position, and this other subheader is going to go up under it. Right? Right. It'll look like it disappeared, and we're like, what the hell? If it's your first time doing this and you didn't have me telling you this, you'd be like, it disappeared. It won't be disappeared. It will be hidden. And we'll have to put an equal margin on that's equal to however high this header is to make it show up again. So pretzel header, let's go ahead and fix that so it always stays on the top of the screen, even when I scroll. So down to position, call it fixed, and we'll do it 0 and 0. 0 from top, and 0 from the left. And you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to change the width a bit. Instead of making it 1100 pixels, I'm going to take this and set it to percent and call it 100%. I have to type in percent again. Now for in here, it looks the same, but when I switch to, no, notice also what happened. I promised you my green bar would disappear. It's hidden under there. So my subheader, I have to go to my subheader and add some margin to the top of that, and it'll start to pop down. All right. Cool. And you know what? I'm going to take this off, this left margin. And you're probably wondering, what the hell's that little thing? Well, the default for the browser, there's a margin around the entire body. We're going to take that off in a minute. We're going to write our own rule for the body today. Okay, in fact, you know what? Let's just set all these back to 0 for this, and then go back and put just the top one in. Wasn't paying attention to my other values. All right, so we've got to have it equal to the other one, 150. It's perfect. All right, preview. Yes. Let's scroll. The red bar at the top should stay there. Everything else will scroll up under it. And that's exactly what I wanted to happen. So this will say something like, how to make a sourdough starter. And no matter where I go on this page, that'll always be there to remind people what the hell they're doing. I mean, what the heck they're doing. Okay. Also notice it says making sourdough pretzels at the top. We're going to go ahead and get rid of all these guys because I'm getting a lot of tabs up there. Okay, we'll keep one. All right, Dreamweaver. All right, nesting something. Let's say I need a picture and an image in here, or a picture and some text. Now, depending on how you want this to work, if I put, depending on the size of the picture, if I put a picture that's the same width of this and then another picture after, the second picture will stack right under it anyway. So before you go ahead and think about nesting things, just remember the normal stacking order. If I have a picture that's, let's go back to my SD main and check out the width. The width of this is 500 pixels. If I shove in here a 500 pixel wide image that's 200 pixels tall, and then I add another one, the next image will go right under it just because there's no room over to the other side for it to go. We just have to go under because that's how the normal stacking order works. Things stack top to bottom. So if I have a bunch of images in here and they're all 500 pixels wide, they'll automatically, if I make sure when I export them from Photoshop they're 500 pixels wide, they'll stack up automatically just in a line. And that would be, awesome. If, however, I want a picture to center in here, or, there's always reasons that you'll need to have like a box inside a box, so you can sort of so you can have different areas for things. I can't say that word, compartmentalize. I just did, dang it. Okay, so then for the next demo, we're actually going to have graphics. So, but remember, the wireframe is sort of the highlight now. But I just want to show you the whole idea of parenting. So, and nesting objects within another thing, because it's super important. Okay, so let's go over here to this SD main. What if I want to add something in there? You know, it has default content already. I think I also need to add more margin to the top. Somehow messed up my margin and went under there. Let's add more. Oh, I forgot to add margin to this before. It's not quite so much. Okay, something like that. You know, there's content in here already showing you where you would put your content. It's in between, you know, everything will be between my, the start of my HTML tag, which is in brackets, and the end of my HTML tag, which is also in brackets, but has the /. My content would go in there, just like it says. It literally tells you, put your content here. So if I had an image, I could drag the image into here. I could insert my image. Obviously, if I need text, I just type the text right in there. I can say, I'm going to put a really cool illustration here. Okay. And I could start doing some formatting for that. But like I said, I want to go ahead and we'll, let's just put 2 boxes to type, and we'll try to, we'll put them in different spots in this page. We'll put one in the upper left and one in the lower right. That would be a good little way to show parenting. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, I'm going to get rid of this. Actually, I can keep that type if I want. In fact, I'm even going to select it, that type that's there, to show you different ways to do this. If I go to my insert menu, and first of all, note that I'm within this main navigation, or this main content section. Like, there's the beginning, there's the end. I have my selected area inside of that, because I'm going to have, that's going to be my parent. I'm going to make a little child for it, that little nested box in here. So I can go to my insert menu and I can say, oh, now here I could put another section in there. I could put an aside in there. I'm just going to pick section because that's pretty clear. So it's going to be a section. So I'll click on that. And notice it's saying wraparound selection, which is what I want to do. So it'll end up within my SD main 0 because this selection I currently have is within that. And that's what I want. And I'm going to call this, I'll make this a class, I'll call this big picture, assuming I'm going to put a big picture in there. Or in this case, we'll call it big type because I'll have some type in there. And I'll make the type big. Okay, and then I'll click New CSS Rule. Now this box that I'm putting it in is 500 pixels, so we'll make it a little less than that just so you can see the edges of it. I'm going to put it in my sourdough. We'll say OK. I'm going to go to my background and have it, let's do like a yellow-green, I think, so we can tell. Lime green. And I want to make sure the box is about 450, and we'll do it about 250 pixels tall. So it'll only fill half that area. And again, all these will be 0 for us for now. And then we'll say OK and OK. And you can see we have that box within that box. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because the child, which is this lime green box, will follow its parent, which is the more of a St. Patrick's Day green, an Irish green. I don't know what you'd call that green. If I go to my CSS Designer and I move this big green box, which is my SD main, let's say I just go ahead and change the margin and I move that down, its child goes with it. All right, so if you break up your major parts of the screen into the sections you need first, then you can nest all the other little smaller pieces within it and move them together as a block. This is super important because if you make everything individually, like if I had like 5 buttons over here and I individually defined and a piece for them, and then I want to move them all, I could possibly have to move 5 different objects instead of 1. If I put all 5 of them in one box and move that one box, then remember I can take take this red background and set it back to no background so you won't see this thing, so it's not going to look ugly as all get out, I can move everything within it by just moving its outline container, its parent container. So as you start to put this thing together, your wireframe, that's an important thing to note, this whole parent-child idea. So if you see something that's going to have 5 of the same sort of similar things, like 5 links, or a structure like a picture and some text, you can make a big box for it and then break it down later if you need to. So you can just kick it down the road a little bit if you need to. Okay, so we will go ahead and stick another piece in here and put a different block of type in there, and we'll align that to the right edge. So let's do that. Let's go back to our content. We need more room here. All right, I'm going to click on that last thing we did, the big type box. You can see it's right here. Notice how it indented it. So it makes it look really easy to read. We have our main section. We have our new section that's nested in there. So line 13 to 15 is our outline dark green block. And then this is our lime green box that's in there. So where do I want to put my next block? Well, I want to go here and hit return. I don't want it nested within this section that's lime green. I want it nested within my main ID SD main 0. I want it nested in there and following this one. So it should follow my stacking order within this. So click there, go to my insert menu. I'm going to add another section. We'll call this second block. Or I'll call it second type since I put some type in there. And we'll also make this sourdough CSS. We'll make this background something much more, let's like make it an orange. An orangish yellow. Okay. And we'll say it's going to be, let's do 450 again. So it'll automatically go onto that next line. Actually, you know what? Let's make it smaller because I'm going to show you some variations of what's going to happen here. We'll make it 200 wide and 200 tall, be a square. 0, 0. Okay. Okay. Okay, we need more room here. Alrighty. That's curious. I put in the units wrong somewhere because look at this big blue box. Let's go back to my designer here for a minute and go to my second type because I definitely did something wrong. Do show set, that would make it easier. 200 pixels, that's all correct. Let's go back to my split view. It is in there. Huh. I'm gonna click up here just for a minute and go to design view just for a second and back to live view. Also, okay, well that was it. It was just Dreamweaver being weird. I'm so glad that came up. That probably makes you a little unsettled that the screen just changed and clearly it wasn't doing what I expected it to. But just as an FYI, Dreamweaver can be a little quirky, which is odd. So sometimes don't trust what you see in your live view. Always trust your browser view because that's what's important. That's what your user will see based on the HTML. You know, it's essentially writing HTML and CSS, which you can write in any program, really. You could Microsoft Word and you could write it. You just wouldn't be able to see it until you used your browser. But we'll go ahead and put it back in Google Chrome so we can see how things are looking. And everything looks cool. So there's our new nested box. Again, everything still. This one moves when I move the browser edge. I wanted to do that. I want it on that right edge all the time. So if someone has a window this big, everything's going to be centered. If someone has a window this big, everything's going to look centered. I've neglected to set this to 100%. This green bar, which I will do, will set that to 100% wide. So it'll also go all the way across the screen. Everything will look nice and symmetrical. Okay, and so also you can see what happened here. And I'm going to change a few parameters. We're going to focus right on this, these two nested boxes that are nested within the darker green, the parent. Just to show you again, we're really going to talk about the stacking order. What happens if I make this green box smaller? Well, it would be slightly different if it was an image. If it was an image, whatever the next image would be would take up the next spot next to it. But since these are sections, that is not necessarily going to happen unless I float them. So, for example, let's go ahead and go to big type, and we'll make it smaller. Okay, so there's clearly enough room for this box to go up here, but what I need to do that? Well, I would need to float that one to the right and float this one to the left. If I take this one over here and I float it to the right, it'll come over here, which is actually where I wanted it to begin with. So, but I just want to show you some examples here. So I need to uncheck the show set, go down to the floats and say float that one right. And it pops over there. But it recognizes this box is above it. Remember, if I want it to come up here, this one's also going to have to be floated. So I can go to my big type and I can say float that one left. And then that one pops up there. Now, what happens if this one won't fit within the parameters of this larger parent? For example, if I go to my big type, which is this one, and I go ahead and I make that bigger again, set it back to its normal size. We'll go to the width, and I'll start increasing this width by just scrubbing here. And boom, you can see that second box won't fit there. It gets bumped to the next line. All right. Now, if you want some flexibility there, you can go to that big green box and take the width off. Now, we're set it to a percentage. As long as it has something in it. I'm going to wait till I actually have graphics in here to do that. But a box, a lot of times you actually don't even put a width on it or a height on it. You let that be defined by what's ever inside of it. So if there's graphics inside of it, whatever the bounding box will be will automatically be the size of the graphic. But these things don't really have any content in except for type, and type, as you can tell, is fluid. It will just go to as far as it can go and then kick the next line. It's good like that. Okay, so that shows you a lot about how the parenting relationship works. Again, if I move this outline box, all the center stuff goes along with it. Let's do this one last time. This box was called SD main. Let's just go ahead and move the margin again so you can see everything moving along with it. All right, so very handy to know when you're putting your wireframe together is you can kick some of the things down the line and worry about your basic overall structure first. You don't need to make a div or a section for absolutely everything. If I had a bunch of lines of type in here, actually let's go to this guy over here. I'm going to select that type so I know where it is in my split view. And I just write step 1. And then if I put, so now it says probably step 1. Now here's the problem with the fact that they're fixed is I can't see them when I scroll down like that. So it says step 1 here. And I wanted to put then step 2 next to it. Well, if I write step 2, it's going to be on the same line. So I'd have to put a break. Watch, if I put step 2, it comes on the next line. But I can go ahead and put a break, which is bracket, BR, and bracket. And oops, I put it in the wrong spot. I'm going to cut it on my keyboard, put it right there. Okay, you probably also noticed this has a big gap, but that gap doesn't show up, right? You only get to see one space. If you need more room, you have to do it with CSS rule. You're gonna have to put like a rule on this number and some margin on that rule to make this number go away from this edge. We'll do that later. This is pretty much what I wanted to cover today was parenting, fixed positioning, and setting something to 100%, which we did for our header, so it spans the width. There'll be some other things that come up when we actually put a graphic in there, because the graphic won't necessarily automatically go to 100% until we actually learn about doing that later on this semester. Can't do everything at once. Okay, I hope that's all. If you have any questions, just email me. In the next section, we're going to put some images in here. We're going to have the Photoshop mock-up done, export some images, and start adding the actual look and feel of this thing to this layout.